Hello, Angela, and welcome to the Your Path to Empowerment speaker series. It's a pleasure to have you here today. And I would love, in your own words, if you can share with the audience who you are and what your story is.
Thank you. Yes. Well, I'm Angela Clement, and I was a school principal. And when I lost my husband to colon cancer in 2021, my whole life changed. And so since then, I have become a speaker, a writer, an author, a podcast host. I've interviewed a lot of people for different grief summits. And through all of that experience, I have learned a lot about the process of grief. And I found that I need to share the message of hope to people because that's something that I didn't have when I first lost Blaine. It felt like there was nowhere to turn. And so I'm really on a mission to spread the message about grief, how it is a healing process, and to just, comfort people and also help them find resources and inspiration to carry on. Yeah.
And you mentioned hope. Where in your own journey did that spark of hope start to come back in, and what was the catalyst for it?
Yeah. So sometimes it's just something not, it doesn't have to be a big thing. But I was sitting in the tub, if you can imagine, just, so depressed. And as anyone who's lost a loved one knows what that feels like. I didn't know where I was going to go with all of this. And I was searching the internet for someone who didn't tell me that I was going to grieve for a lifetime, that I would never, ever get over it, that I would be like this for the rest of my life. And I found a fellow's article. His name was Sean Doyle, and it had 4 ways to be okay after you lose your loved one. And there was one point in that article that was about starting life number 2. And there was something about that message that I thought, okay, so I wonder if I can bravely step into a new life. And then as I kept searching, because I thought, well, if he went through this kind of situation where he lost his wife, actually, it was quite suddenly, and he was able to create this new life and to live happiness and joy again, then other people must be able to do it too. So I found a lady's quote on Facebook. Her name is Julie Clough. And her quote was, "People will say you grieve for a lifetime. I choose otherwise. I choose I choose the path from hurt to hope to healing every day."
Wow.
Yeah. And that quote, just when I read that, that was what I wanted. I wanted to hear that message. And so I went and did the 30-minute discovery session, and I was terrified. I was just terrified about working with a coach. I was terrified about having to tell my story. I knew I was going to cry and I didn't want to do that. And it was just, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And she gave me the hope and the inspiration and the tools I needed to move forward and to start to build this new life.
Wow, those are very powerful words, from hurt to hope to healing every day. And I
Yeah.
feel like they transcend the moment in time, right? Like it transcends the event of something that happened. It can be for everything that everyone can find great. I think those are powerful words to sort of say to ourselves every day as we move through. What in your journey, though, as you decided to move forward, that there was an opportunity for the spark of hope and that could lead to you having what felt like a second life, like a new chapter could open to you? What along the way sparked you wanting to then turn around and be this powerful, potent guide and leader for others?
Mm. Well, I was really interested in energy healing. Since my son was very sick when he was young, I always had an interest because we took him to an energy healer and she helped him. And so I was always kind of fascinated about that. And so when Blaine passed away, and actually while he was sick, I got pretty serious about energy healing and what I could do. And so I took some classes. And one of the classes that I enlisted in was with a lady by the name of Adrienne Blackwell. And she is a celebrity healer. And what she did was taught us a whole bunch of different modalities. And she ended up getting us to do a summit. And of course, I did my summit on grief. And I will say that before that, I never dreamed I would be doing something like that. I was not an outgoing person, you know. Yes, I was a school principal, but I was an introvert, really, by nature, and quite quiet. And so this was really stepping out of my comfort zone, inviting people that I don't know to come to a summit that I have no idea, you know, I've never done before. It was a big step. But what I discovered is that I loved it. I loved interviewing these people. And I loved the message that they were bringing about grief. And so I just kept doing it. I did 4 summits. I interviewed, you know, over 100 people. And I truly believe that the people that came to me in those summits came to me at exactly the right time for my own healing. They had those messages I needed at the perfect time, the perfect place. And I know that, you know, Blaine had a big part in helping me orchestrate that. And so, yeah, I was supported all the way through all of that. And I learned so much about healing and how we move through the grieving process. And so that's how I got here.
It's remarkable. And I do also want to highlight that there's such a beautiful thread of you moving through fear, moving outside of your comfort zone. And that each time you do, it's like a new portal opens up for you and you keep moving through it, which is inspiring for all of us because much like the individual with those 4 points that you first read in the bath who gave you that spark, it's like when we see that mirror, it's like, well, she can do it. She found it. It must be possible is so powerful and transformative. I'd also like to elaborate more on energy healing and how you in supporting others through this portal of transformation with grief, how do you bring in energy healing and what does that actually mean for you?
Yeah, so I know that our bodies have their own natural way of healing. And what I do is really just hold space for your body to be able to do what it naturally needs to do. And so, through a whole bunch of different modalities, Reiki, we learned shamanic healing. Right now I'm drawing a blank, but I've the Wonder Method. I've taken so many different types of healing modalities. And so I have a mix of things that I use that I take from each of those. And depending whether we're doing an online session or an in-person session, I will use different modalities. But it all is about the same thing. It's about your body's natural way of healing. And for me to hold that space while your body does that. And I didn't understand it really until I experienced it myself. And I know with the emotions of grief and how strong they are, if you can have someone help move that through you, it makes a huge, huge difference.
Wow. Yes. I love how you add in all these different layers. And I know you have your own modality of awakening the soul, where you combine energy and you combine spirit and you combine these events that have happened in your life. Can you share more about what that is?
Yeah. So, one of the biggest help for me was that a lot of these energy healers that I worked with were also mediums. And so I would get these profound messages from Blaine that they could never have known. And so it was that confirmation that he truly was close. And then over time, because I was interested, I started to explore more myself, and I started to be able to make that connection with him myself. And so, and with my guides, and so that opened up a whole new world for me. Um, and another way to heal, because I can access those helpers to help me through lots of different things that still come up, and not necessarily for grief, but for life, And so you've got these tools and you've got this support and help with you all the time. Everybody does. But it's when you really recognize it and you feel it, that's when it really starts to make an impact.
And what you mentioned so many things that have been sort of catalysts for opening up, either small opportunities or much larger shifts. How do you, or what are some of the stories that you would like to share from your experience in guiding others through experiencing their own transformation, their own shifts?
Yeah, well, I think everybody goes through a space where they start to really question why they're here. You get so depressed.
Yeah.
I remember Mother's Day was a horrible experience for me. It came out of nowhere. I didn't expect it to be so bad. And when it hit, it was like a ton of bricks. And I know people refer to that as sometimes like the dark night of the soul, where you're just in that space where it's so dark and so sad and so depressing. And you just don't even want to be here. To be quite honest, it's like I could just leave this earth. I don't really need to be here. And so I went through that. And what I learned through some of the helpers that were helping me, energy healers and things, that dark night of the soul is really a turning point or a catalyst for you to start to recognize who you truly are. And so I like to tell people, we go through that and we think that that's an awful thing. But my perspective now, looking back, it's a wonderful thing. It is a big part of your healing process. And if you can just sit with it and allow it to teach you what it wants. But I wouldn't do it alone.
That's good.
I will caveat that.
Yeah.
Because it is intense. The emotions are intense. It's really a lot. And so I had help. I had a coach, I had energy healers working with me. And I always tell people, when you're in that space, there's no need to do that alone. But know that it's a catalyst for healing. It's going to help you move forward.
And it's inspiring to see people who have, and to hear your story, and to you be so frank and honest about how painful and difficult and not wanting to continue, and that's part of it. And that's not like it's the then keep going, and
Yes.
how to look for the support and how to look for the right healers for you, or the coaches, or the right community. And what within all the myriad of things that you create, would you like to share so the audience knows that you're also a wonderful resource that they can turn to and look up more about or find your own community?
Yeah, for sure. Well, people can look to my website. It's healingenergy.world. And there I have all of my resources. I've got some meditations on there. I write a blog. I've been writing a blog actually since the beginning of my journey. And so you can go back and you can follow the whole story from beginning right up until the recent past here. And I've also written a book, Awakening Through Grief. There it is. It just launched actually a few days ago. And so that book is full of the exercises that I did that helped me through. And so they're the ones that really made a difference for me. And so I tell my story. And at the same time, I'm kind of bringing in that educator in me, and I'm teaching um, how I managed to move through, and the exercises and the people and resources that helped me. And so my mission now is to kind of get that word out there so that people will have something that they can grab onto when they get into that space where they don't know where else to turn.
Well, first, congratulations on the
Thank
birth
you.
of your book. That's an amazing, amazing hallmark and an amazing resource for people to be able to have in their own hands. What are some things in particular that are in your book that you would like to share with the audience?
Um, well, it really is. Um, I think through the whole story, it's about hope. It's about having that connection with your loved one and how that can develop, because my story is all about how I developed that connection with Blaine and the synchronicities and things that started to happen, and how I could open myself up to that and allow that to guide me through the process.
And can you
Because
share? Can you elaborate more on that so we can, have the
yeah,
picture in our own mind of
sure.
that's
Yeah,
possible?
it was just little synchronicities. So, for instance, when I was writing my blog, and I was very much encouraged to do that, and that was another bold, brave step to start putting my story out there. And I noticed each time I was writing it, I could hear this bird outside my window, and I wasn't a bird person. I like birds, but I mean, some people know the songs that they sing and they know the names of the birds, and I had no clue, right? But I could hear this bird, and it was incessant, and as I traveled, I did a lot of traveling, and as I did that, I heard it in different places, in different countries, and I kept thinking, wow, what is this bird? And it actually kind of haunted me for a while because I couldn't figure out what it was.
Mm.
Um, and I was talking to my daughter one day, and I said to her, I said, it sounds like an owl, but it can't be an owl because it's happening during the day. And she said, well, why don't you look up birds that sound like an owl?
Right? Ever the pragmatist.
Yeah, I Googled that, and here it was a mourning dove.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
so I looked up the messages of the mourning dove, and it's just, well, I have it in the book, but there are so many messages that are so beautiful around the mourning dove. And the mourning dove is spelt mourning, like Mourning, which is kind of cool too. And so when I figured that out, I felt like it was just a real message from Blaine. And then there was another sound that started to come in that was very similar, and it ended up being another type of bird, an Eurasian collared dove. So the doves to me are really there. I always hear them, and wherever I go, they are just a comfort to me. So that's just one of the little stories, that just kept spurring me on. It was just a little bit of inspiration. And each time I would hear it, it would just do my heart, really give me that comfort and peace that I needed to just keep moving forward and knowing that I was being supported and guided. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Birds are potent. Birds show up for me too. So I'm always, when someone mentions birds, I'm
Yeah.
like, ooh, which bird?
Yeah.
But that even in the name that there is a meaning to it is
Mm-hmm.
very profound. And I can feel how that affected you and brings you. You
Yeah.
can see on your face that it.
Yeah. Yeah. It was huge. Mm-hmm.
And what else? What else have you noticed as you've worked with as a counselor and coach in helping others, what are some of their stories that you'd like to share? Just as a way for others to see, like, here's a mirror. Here's,
Yeah.
it's moving. It's possible for you to see what's possible.
Yeah, well, I've watched transformation of several people over the last couple of years, and it does my heart so good. So I have a group get together, I call it. It's a support group for grief, maybe a little bit different than the mainstream support group in that we just get together. there's really no agenda. It happens about every 10 days. I send out an email and we get together, and there's a core group there that have been with me for the last 2 years. And I've watched them transform over the last 2 years. And it's just been amazing. One of them has become an author since we started, and she's doing her own work with grief. There's another one that became really good friends with me, and we ended up traveling to Bali and doing a retreat together.
Amazing.
Yeah, and some that were in a really, really dark place and have moved past that and have found their own journey. One in particular is now developing as a medium. And so it's just, all over the map. And every time I meet with that group, and I mean, there's new ones coming in now. So it's really kind of cool to have this core group of experienced, they've gone through the process and they're building their new life. And then we've got new ones that are just starting, and they can share with each other, what they're going through, and everybody understands it because it's grief. It's once you've gone through that, you kind of understand the language of what it's about. And it's huge to have grief acknowledged. And so in that group, I think that's the biggest thing. And then I hold the space for that healing to take place. And so it's just beautiful. It's beautiful and magical. It does my heart as much good as anybody's. It really does.
It sounds beautiful. It sounds like a really special group, and it has that magic of allowing those at all the different stages to come together.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's powerful. So I have another question. As you brought up that there is like a discomfort, or we don't sort of in like traditional North American cultures bring grief as like it's a natural part of life, and how do we embrace it and how do we bring it into the collective? So for those of us or those in the audience who aren't experiencing a grief that's personal to us, that's like a direct, but maybe it's in our community or it's certainly in the collective in abundance right now, what words would you like to share for how to move through it or be better allies for those around us who are directly moving through it?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing is not to abandon those people. I mean, I know that it's uncomfortable. I felt it myself. I had friends that lost loved ones, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. We took food to their house, and then we went away. Right? We hoped that they would heal.
Right.
That's the way our society is, and so the ones that really supported me kept at it. They remembered the days, the special days, and they remembered to contact me on those days. And I think that was, well, more than anything, remembering that death anniversary or that person's birthday and just sending a text. That's all it takes, is just a message to say, I'm thinking of you today. I know it must be hard. That is hugely supportive and easy to do. But also just sitting with people who are grieving, and you really don't have to say a lot. It's just being there. I know for Christmas, a couple of my friends took me for a drive, and we went and looked at the Christmas lights. And I remember that just feeling like, this is so great. Like, I'm just loving this, and just having that ability to be flexible with those people, to be flexible with them as they move through their days, because some days are going to be better and some days are not going to be great. And so as you're moving, you just have to be really sensitive to that. And the more support you give, the better it is, because you're helping that person move forward. And when I say support, I'm saying giving them the autonomy, to be able to move through it on their own, not to do everything for them kind of thing, right. But giving them that ability to know that you're there, that you're supporting, and, you will help out however you can, you're just there, and allowing them to move through with your support. I think that's the biggest thing because we just don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. We walk away and sometimes what happens, and this is really sad, but people think that there's a timeline and they believe that after a certain amount of time, maybe a year, you should be doing better. And and then you get this message like, well, you need to move on. You need to get, and there is no timeline. So it's moving through at your own pace, and people need to be sensitive to that. And it doesn't matter the grief. Some people say, well, losing a pet isn't as bad as losing a spouse, but it depends on the relationship you have with
That's
that
right.
particular,
Yeah.
you know it's all about the relationship. Grief is grief is grief. And so I've gotten, so I don't compare that anymore. We don't compare our losses, because nobody can really truly understand your particular loss and what you are feeling. And so it's being sensitive to that too, with people.
Thank you. Thank you for actually for like stating that out loud, because I feel like we always feel, or I should only speak for myself, like an awkwardness. I know when my dog of like 15 years died, I have never felt such sadness, nor have I wept so openly ever in my life. It was like my body was like, she's gonna let us cry. Let's
Yeah.
go. And it is.
Exactly.
And I think there is so much judgment, and the judgment comes usually because we feel really uncomfortable and we don't want to feel uncomfortable. So we feel like, well, hurry up so
Yeah.
that we can feel less, we the non in the thick of it individuals can be more comfortable.
Yes, yes. And that's what we end up doing as grievers. We don't want other people to feel uncomfortable. And so then we stop talking about how we feel because it's making other people uncomfortable. And yet that is the very thing you need to do for your healing, is to be able to talk to people about it. So yeah, it's tough.
It sounds like the real gift is helping others embrace the art of holding space.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that
And it's not as
it's
hard to do as you think. It just isn't.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like also within your book there's more help or guidance on doing that, on whether you're holding space for yourself or you're holding space for those you love who are moving through transformative periods in their life.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the message is, embracing grief, because I see grief as a pathway to transformation. I talk about that, but I also talk about how we often want to run from it because it's something that we talk about. It's sad. All of these emotions are coming up. There's anger, there's jealousy, there's guilt, there's all of these things that we don't, as a society, we don't want to feel those things, and rightfully so. They don't feel so great. But each time that one of those emotions comes up, it's an opportunity for you to heal. And grief is a natural process. It's something that we need to learn to embrace, because that's how we move forward. That's how our body and our mind and our spirit is allowed to move through it. And if we push it away and say, I don't want to feel guilty, I don't want to feel jealous, I don't want to, then we can't heal. It's just, and so it's the absolute opposite of what we do is what we need. We really need to embrace grief. And I know that's hard for people to hear when you're going through the depths of that pain, but it really is about being able to sit in that pain and to allow it to go through you and to release it rather than trying to push it down. My coach always said, you're trying to push those emotions down. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. Eventually, you're not going to be able to hold it anymore, and it's going to fly up in your face. And this is why we have, the grief bursts and all those things that happen, because eventually you just can't hold it. It's just too much.
Right. It'll come out, and it can either be, as serves you or unpredictable.
Yes, absolutely. And those moments you learn to, you get the tools, I can teach you those things. You get the tools so that you know what to do when that starts to happen. And then an interesting thing happens when sadness comes up or some kind of emotion that you don't like. you go, okay, this is an opportunity for me to heal. And what is this telling me? And what is this about? And what beliefs or what thoughts or what things are coming forward that I need to look at? And and as soon as you see it, often it just disperses. And once you've done it a few times and you recognize that, then life just gets better. It really does.
So, what do you recommend, or how do you help move people through the resistance? So, before they've even gotten to grief and all the giant rainbow of emotions within that, how do you
Mhm.
help them move through the resistance to accepting that it's time to move through the grief?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a gentle process, and especially in the beginning. And so, we talk about it when we can, but also the energy healing, um, just being able to hold the space for that energy to move, lightens up the load on some of those really heavy emotions. I also use oracle cards. I use my own intuitive guidance to kind of know
Mhm.
what messages need to come forward. What are the right messages at this time for this particular individual, and really make it a unique, well, it is a unique experience.
It's very personalized, and it's like someone has the ability, you have the ability to touch in with like, well, what's ready to like be shown or gifted or let go of in this moment. I also love how you bring in that you bringing in energy work allows things to move, that it doesn't have we live in a society that is so cognitive focused that we get stuck thinking that like, well, we have to keep talking about it or talking about it, talking about it. And that has a place and needs to come out, but it's
Mhm.
not the only avenue to keep moving forward.
No, for sure. There are ways that we can be a little more gentle with the process. and and yeah, and it's just really, in the end, it ends up being, the stories that we're telling ourselves in our head, and our beliefs. And so when we start to dig into that a little bit, sometimes a huge healing takes place in those moments, and it's just a matter of knowing, when we're ready to look at that, and being gentle with people in that process, because it's really tough.
It sounds like the theme that keeps coming for me is that the ability to see a gift in grief, that it's the gift to like unpack all these things. And maybe some are directly related through the grief you're moving through, or all the other things that, it's time to reevaluate or change your perspective or make new choices. To me, and listening to you, that's where like the transformative power of grief comes. It's like a hard stop, a hard pause. You cannot look away. What will you do now? What do you want to choose?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I really think, because grief it starts when we leave the womb. It
Right.
really starts right there, and it continues on. And so it's something, I think it's really a part of life, and we know that. But it takes one of these really big losses, like me losing my spouse, to really have a hard look at it and go, okay, what is this? And like you say, sometimes you have a loss and you haven't dealt with many losses before that particular one. And then they all come up for healing at one time, and it can be very overwhelming. So, yeah, I think the energy healing really helps with that.
It sounds like it. It sounds like it's a beautiful support to all the other things together. That there's no like, here's the one magic step to take. It's like you're a unique human being and these are all. And it sounds like you, through your own journey with yourself first, and then in supporting others, keep adding layers to how to really personalize it and honor someone's autonomy moving through it.
For sure. Yeah. And there are so many different modalities, and none of them is better than the other, except different things work for different people, and people will embrace different modalities and ways of moving through. And there's some really simple, easy techniques that you can do to help yourself
Would you
through.
like to share one today for the
Sure,
audience to take
yeah.
away?
So if people want to look up Donna Eden Energy Medicine, She has a 5 minute daily routine.
Okay.
And I knew about that when Blaine was sick. I knew about it actually before that. And whenever I was feeling really tough, the emotions were getting too much, I would do that routine. And it just takes a few minutes. And I wouldn't even have to do the whole thing. There were certain aspects of that routine that I could pull out and say, this really helps when I do this. And just stop and do it and try it, and there's lots of different ways it's been presented online. There's lots of different people who have taken it and done it to music and
What
so
is it? Like if you were to give, and or part of it, you say you can do certain parts of it. What's like
yeah,
one?
so it's a routine. So for instance, tapping on your
Yes.
thymus. Um, that's part of that whole thing. Doing like a crossover, pulling the energy from one side to the other, because we tend to get pretty homolateral, and to heal, you really need those energies to cross.
Okay.
So that's another one. What I did with Blaine a lot was what she calls the triple warmer smoothie, which is basically taking the energy. Actually, she puts her hands over her eyes and then pulls it around to her ears, around and behind. And this is where the vagus nerve is, right? So you're
Yep.
crossing through that and then back behind the shoulders and down onto the heart.
Oh, that's
And
lovely.
that one, I don't think she always includes it in the daily energy routine, but you can look that one up through Triple Warmer Smoothie. It just helps to
Okay.
calm the nervous system. And I found that one really powerful. And in my story, I talk about how I used it with Blaine, and actually it helped him to cross over. So
Oh, wow.
there's it's there's so many techniques like that that are so simple to do that people don't know about. And so it's just, even yawning. Yawning is a great way to release energy. And you can do that on purpose anytime.
Or if you hear someone say the word yawn, my
Exactly.
body's like, are you gonna yawn now?
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many different techniques out there, and it's just a matter of trying them and seeing which ones work for you, and then you've got some tools in your toolbox. When things start to get rough, you know what you can do. It's,
It sounds like your book might also be a wonderful resource because yes, there's lots of different things to do, but sometimes that feels overwhelming,
yeah.
especially if you're in the thick of moving through or feeling stuck. It can then be like, well, I don't know. I don't know. It's too many. I can't. So
Yeah.
it sounds like if you pick one,
Yeah.
pick one that resonates with you. And I love that all the ones you mentioned, they are like tactile, right? That they're
Mm-hmm.
energetic and tactile. It's connecting you back to your body.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
looking ahead, what are you most excited that you're helping to bring forth? Obviously, your book is a huge part of the next step of your journey, but what else is coming up for you?
Yeah. Well, I started a podcast in January. So
Exciting.
done like 40 episodes. And so I'm excited to continue that. There's a little piece of me that would like to get out in public a little bit more, do more speaking, do more in-person engagements. And so I'm looking towards that, do some book signings, meet some people, maybe do some online workshops, maybe some question and answer webinars. We'll see what people need. But it's exciting to just think about the possibilities of, maybe even doing a retreat sometime or
Ooh.
something along that line. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, please. I think there's such a want for more in person, and there needs to be more dialogue that grief is a normal part of the human experience. So how can you support yourself? How can you support your loved ones? How does it, right? Like why let's not add on the extra like societal pressure or avoidance. It's,
Mm-hmm.
challenging enough. And I love that you keep mentioning that it's a gift and there's a spark and there's this catalyst for looking at, okay, now what? What do you want? You've been through pain and all I have not gone through this experience, so I can't even name what all of the emotions might be, but this enormous vault of feeling It's like, well, now what do you want? It's like you have your crayon box and it's got all the colors now. And it's like, okay, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's two ways of looking at it, right? There's the victim mentality, and no diss on anyone who goes down that road, because you have every right to go down the road of being a victim, because you're suffering a great loss. And then there's the perspective, and it tends to come at some point where you just don't want to be the victim anymore. You're just tired of it. It's not getting you anywhere. And so when you start to look at yourself and you start to take care of yourself, and then you start to think about what could be next, that's where things start to change. And it takes some time. I mean, when you read my book, you'll see there was a turning point at which I started to thinking, okay, I'm going to be all right. We're going to move this. And I'm not saying that it happens overnight. Certainly it does not, but it's small steps. It's taking little steps. And then I always say, if you take one step, the universe takes 10 for you, especially if you're going in the direction that you need to go. Right. And so just embracing. It's challenging. You have to have a bit of courage sometimes to step into these things, but just knowing that you're supported and guided and that there is help out there.
And you've mentioned courage and stepping outside of your comfort zone. And it's your story alone, as just one story, shows what opens up because of that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And there's a whole aspect in my book about the brain and how
Amazing.
it takes in information, and how, people go through those moments where they think they're going to walk through the door, or they're going to phone, or, I kept using the language we all the time. I couldn't get over the fact that it was just me. And so there's a whole understanding around the way the brain works that can bring a lot of comfort too. And so I share about that in my book as well. Yeah.
Great. That gives another language to use too, right? Because some of us might naturally gravitate towards energy healing. I also love the brain. So I love that within one book you address like there's different ways. What's the language that's reacting to you now, or speaking to you now? That's
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah. And then you can go down whatever rabbit hole you like, right? So
Yes.
Maria Francis Connor has all this work she's done, brain research. I interviewed her on my podcast, so you can go watch that episode. But it's if you're the scientific person that wants to understand what's happening, the processes in your body, then absolutely, it will give you a lot of comfort to understand what's happening.
This has been wonderful and certainly helped me see. I would say prior to this, I'm more likely someone who not fully avoids grief, but that feels that uncomfort. And part of it is the fear of like an overwhelming wall of emotion and being like, well, what do I do with that? So it's wonderful to hear that we'll go back to the basics of an ability to hold space for another human being and continually connect and remind them that you're there.
Yeah.
And from, my perspective, not in the thick of it. And then all the beautiful tools and ways that you've brought forward in your book and your other programs that allow people to actually safely and supported move through this container in a way that can then totally reignite a new exciting chapter in their life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because I don't believe that we were meant to be on this earth to be miserable. I really don't. And so,
Thank you.
you know,
Yes, please.
there is a place for those emotions, the suffering, the sadness, and all of that. But when we embrace that, then there's space for joy, and there's space for fulfillment, and there's space for happiness too. So it's all of that. That's what life is about.
Yes, thank you. Right? Like that's why we signed up. That's why we're here. And that
Mm-hmm.
it keeps you'll move through all the colors and the roller coaster of it. So thank you so much today for sharing all that you have gone through and all the myriad of tools and wonderful opportunities that you create for others. And as we wrap up, what would you like to leave the guests with? What would you like the audience to take away from today and maybe think about or be that that spark of hope for them?
Yeah. Well, I always just tell people not to give up. to keep looking, because there is a way. There are many, many people who have gone down this path, and you absolutely can do it too. You absolutely can. It's just a matter of finding those resources and that support, and just using your own intuition and guidance, to help you through it. There's a lot of support that you don't see maybe around you that you can access. And so there's lots of people who can help you do that. I can help you do that. And there's lots of others out there that are doing this work. And so just keep searching. And I thank you for this platform. I really do. I thank you for what you're doing. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.